Welcome to Peacevision. We are a portal for positive change. And I had the pleasure of traveling to Cuba with my next guest. This is David Guggenheim. And David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
So we want to kind of talk a little bit about how you first got started going to Cuba and working with them to help protect and map the reefs, correct? Tell me about the project.
That's right. Well, Cuba was kind of an accidental turn in my career. I was vice president at Ocean Conservancy, and they had a small project preserving specimens with the Cuban scientists down there. But we decided to really build that into something bigger, and it led to 11 years of expeditions off of Cuba's northwestern coast, which had never been explored, to create the first maps of their coral reefs and their marine ecosystems. And it really humbled me because it made me realize these are really well-trained scientists and warm and wonderful people, but they didn't have the basic tools to do work, including a vessel. And it's kind of important to have a vessel if you're going to be a marine biologist, working with the University of Havana's Center for Marine Research. So one of the things we could do is rent vessels for them, provide diesel, rice, and beans, and our own scientific contributions. So in a way, we helped educate the next generation of Cuban scientists.
And you did more than that. You also got to go on a few expeditions and got a certain Senator Kennedy involved. Tell me about that.
Well, this was Bobby Kennedy Jr., son of the senator. And that was actually part of the Explorers Club. It was their first flagged expedition that I led to Cuba, and to go in search of some mysterious reefs that had never again been mapped, this time on the southern part of the island. And I think significant there, well, two things. One is Bobby Kennedy actually met with Fidel, and there's an interesting thing that we learned. I think it's pretty profound. Well, first of all, I think it's interesting that Fidel Castro would be meeting with a Kennedy, given all the history. But he wrote a letter to Bobby, and it said, "I love the ocean, but I used to kill everything." He was a spear fisherman until I met Captain Cousteau. He met him in 1985. Jacques Cousteau brought the Calypso to Cuba. And even then, he was stunned by the health of the reefs in Cuba. But what was interesting is that Jacques Cousteau and Fidel Castro maintained a friendship, and Jacques Cousteau may be responsible for the fact that Cuba has some of the strongest environmental laws on the planet, including protection of their oceans.
Almost a model for the rest of us, correct?
Yes, it's not perfect. Many things look good on paper, but you don't have a lot of resources. It's hard to make them operationalized in real life, especially when people are hungry. But you know, it is a model for the rest of the world, and something that has somehow escaped the political polarization that goes on environmental issues. Everybody there loves coral reefs. Everybody loves the environment. Maybe that's one of the positive sides of a benign dictatorship, but we don't want to get into those politics.
Now, what we want to stay clear of politics, but we do want to get into what we can actually do to make a difference. So what are some of the things that you would tell people, this is how you can really impact the planet in terms of the ocean and its health?
I think one of the most important things to remember is that we are all connected to the oceans one way or another. The fertilizer that we put on our lawns literally can end up in Mexico or in the oceans. 44% of the landmass in the United States does end up in the Gulf of Mexico. So literally what you do in your backyard can affect the Gulf of Mexico. You hear a lot about plastics and waste and recycling more, and reducing single-use plastics is important. But I think one of the most important things that we can do is be better consumers of fish. I think removing fish from the ecosystem is more than just eating crops that grow in the sea. These guys have important jobs to do, and they are part of the ecosystem, not something separate. And we have two powerful weapons in our pockets or purses, and that's our smartphone and our wallets. And we need to ask a lot of annoying questions to our servers and who are selling us fish. There's a great app on the for your smartphone by the Monterey Bay Aquarium called Seafood Watch, and it will tell you if these fish are sustainable. But you've got to ask your server, what are we eating exactly? Where is this fish from? It's not easy, but if they hear it enough, then their boss will hear it, and eventually the suppliers will hear it. And ultimately, the power of the wallet is what makes the world change very often.
How can people help and support your efforts?
Well, I think people could help us a lot, first by learning more about the oceans. I think that's always the first step, is to really immerse yourself, pun intended, in ocean issues. And second, visit us at oceandoctor.org. We need your help, and we would love to work with you.
Awesome. So, it's always nice to have actionable ways. I mean, we hear so much negative news about how the sky is falling, but all that matters is really what can we do about it, right? Otherwise, what else can we do?
It's really frustrating. It's really frustrating to the average person, and making purchase decisions. The plastic issue is a good example because it is something we have control over in our own lives. You get into climate change and things like that, people feel very helpless to really make a difference. Even though every little we all work together, it does make a difference.
And lastly, I'll fill people in on a secret about you. There's a
No.
coming out that David's writing. It's a little ways off yet still, but tell us about the book, David.
Well, the working title is Coral's Last Stand. And there's a little play on words there, since corals are described as being in stands. But the whole idea is to look at the pretty much unknown story of the demise of coral reefs and the threats that they currently face. There are predictions that coral reefs will be almost gone by the end of this century, and there really is to do that, because we've lost half of them in the last 50, 60 years. It's pretty frightening. So the book traces some of these various stories around why coral reefs are in trouble, but also looks at Cuba and the comparison of Cuba, which has gone down a completely different path, and where I have seen some of the healthiest reefs in my life, in fact, the healthiest reefs in my life, that look even better than those that I saw as a teenager in the Florida Keys growing up. So, and finally, there's a bit of a memoir in there, a little bit of my personal anecdotes. A white guy from Philadelphia working in Cuba for 20 years, making all sorts of mistakes and getting into misadventures, but also finding myself in the middle of a lot of politics. And one of the interesting things is that Cuban diplomats came up to me here in Washington when the Cuban embassy reopened for the first time in 50 years, when diplomatic relations were restored. And they thanked me. They said, David, this wouldn't be possible if not for you. And they didn't mean me in the singular. They meant we in the community of science, working collaboratively for years and building bridges where diplomats couldn't. And I think laying a groundwork of friendship and trust. And it was nice to hear that, but also confirmed that despite my best attempts, there was no way to separate science and politics. It all goes together, and this time in a very good way.
David, thank you so much for bringing your science to bring people together to help make this planet a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.